So thank you very much, everyone. And I want to thank also the organizers for this magnificent event. I will take you briefly through the Enisa Threat Landscape Report. So this is not a new task. This latest report marks the 10-year anniversary of Enisa Threat Landscape Reports. And the reason why we do this is to analyze, to reflect on the past, to analyze incidents, threats, and trends in order to prepare for the future. Now, along with this latest threat landscape report, we published the threat landscape methodology. So now you might ask, why give away the secret recipe? Well, the reason is the threat landscape report cannot cover everything. So we want to help policymakers, risk managers, cybersecurity practitioners, and give them good practices in developing their own threat landscape methodology that are especially focused in their own area of interest, so horizontal, thematic, or sectorial threat landscapes. So the latest Enisa Threat Landscape Report is the 10th annual report. The data used in order to analyze and compile this data is mostly open source intelligence information, incident reporting, third-party consultations, and these are some of the areas that have been identified and highlighted into the report. Now, we'll try to cover as much as possible, but I invite you to go into the report and see for yourselves what's inside there. So some major insights from this latest report. Now, there is a great impact of geopolitics on the cybersecurity threat landscape. So the Ukrainian-Russian conflict reshaped the threat landscape. We've seen a significant rise of hacktivism. We've seen cyber operations in concert with military kinetic activity. We've seen a lot of disinformation campaigns. Now, threat actors increasing their capabilities. We've seen a major increase in exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities. We've seen continuous retirement and rebranding of malicious groups. We've seen hacker as a service business model gaining traction. Now, ransomware attacks against availability ranked the highest during this reported period. We've seen major DDoS attacks, again, as part of the Ukrainian crisis. Phishing remains once again the most common vector for gaining initial access. And finally, novel and hybrid and emerging threats are marking the threat landscape with high impact. We've seen new kinds of compromises, such as the Pegasus surveillance and targeting of civil society, machine learning models being increasingly the target of attacks, as well as artificial intelligence deepfakes. Now, quickly, a quick sector breakdown. The largest number of incidents have been noted in the public administration and government, followed by digital service providers, the general public, and non-NIS sectors and services. So, understanding how the threat actors think, act, and what are their motives is essential into creating a solid and robust cybersecurity strategy. Now, for this purpose, in this latest Enisa Threat Landscape Report, we have considered 4 types of threat actors. These are the state-sponsored actors, cybercrime actors, hackers for hire, and hacktivists. Now, a little bit of insights for these groups. Now, for the state-sponsored actors, we've seen an increase in zero-day and other critical vulnerabilities, a major decrease in the time period between vulnerabilities being disclosed until weaponization, and increased risks for the operational technology networks. We've seen destructive attacks, especially due to the Ukrainian crisis. We've seen data wipers, data destruction, and cyber operation, again, together with military kinetic activity. From the defender side, we've seen public attributions and legal actions against cybercrime groups. We've seen takedowns of these groups and sanctions. Armies of cyber volunteers. The Ukraine did not have the cybersecurity capacity, but it developed it quickly through military activity, through public and private cooperations, through internal and external factors. We've seen a lot of focus into the supply chain compromises. This started with the SolarWind campaign, and the huge impact was a catalyst for this. And finally, we've seen geopolitics continue to have a strong impact to cyber operations, and we've seen cyber state-sponsored actors picking sides along this conflict. Now for cyber criminals. This mostly target industrial sector. This is hugely due to the huge monetization in this area. There are a lot of cloud opportunities as there is a huge move towards cloud infrastructure. There's quite concentrated targets in a small space. Continuous retirement and rebranding of major groups, head rotations, groups being caught or disbanded. A lot of data exfiltration without the use of ransomware. Cybercrime ecosystems thrives with new and novel techniques. And again, Russia and Ukraine conflict having a huge impact. These groups taking side, letting the taking side in this conflict. And finally, hackers for hire and hacktivists. Now we've seen a lot of access as a service being offered towards state-sponsored actors, especially with the Pegasus case. And for hacktivists, now there was very little activity before 2002. This has been reignited due to the Ukrainian crisis. A little bit for the prime threats identified in this report. Now, ransomware. Ransomware groups continue to dominate the charts. Phishing remains the most common vector for initial access, exploiting the remote desktop protocol for initial positioning. Extortion techniques have evolved further. We gained a lot of organizational insights from leaks, especially from the Conti leaks. There was a great analysis from Brian Krebs. We've seen rapid weaponization of vulnerabilities. Now there's an average of 8 days from the disclosing a vulnerability until this is exploited in the wild. And a lot of payment prohibition from many countries and states. Now it remains to be seen how effective this will be. Social engineering threats, a lot of kits and services are being offered. It's a lot expensive to create your own phishing infrastructure and campaign. We've seen a major spear phishing campaigns by the Dukes. Now, this is also known as APT29. This is a major campaign targeting mostly diplomatic missions and ministries of foreign affairs. Ukraine war themes. Now, attackers always like to use the most contemporary crisis in order to urge users to act. It was the same for the COVID-19 situation. Phishing from known accounts. Attackers always like to use a compromise and use known accounts, so because victims always trust better when the email comes from a known account. There's a rise in business email compromise. There's a lot of money to be gained there for cyber criminals, along with vendor email compromise. So you have seen maybe receiving fake invoices from vectors that urge you to send some money. QR codes on the rise. They're now in our everyday lives, QR codes. It's much more difficult to filter a malicious QR code than it is a URL. Consent phishing, the FluBot campaign, again, an SMS campaign urging users to download malicious applications. Voice phishing, receiving phone calls or voice messages, specifically emulating a bank or a police officer in order to urge you to transfer money into their account. And a lot of long-running social engineering attacks. Supply chain attacks, again, pretty quick. Attackers increasingly exploit the complexity of systems and the lack of visibility from the organizations. Now, a lot of organizations struggle in order to manage and filter their suppliers. So attackers exploit this lack of visibility. A lot of exploitation of vulnerabilities in business technologies. Again, attackers have seen that a compromise on a business technology gives a foothold in one organization, which provides a lot of ways to exploit for them. Targeting security researchers in order to gain access, to gain new vulnerabilities. Again, vulnerability research is quite expensive, so the attackers know it, and so they target security researchers. Again, supply chain attacks. After the SolarWinds, we've seen a huge increase in those attacks. Log4Shell vulnerability discovered in 2021 in the Log4j Java packet. We expect attackers will continue to exploit this vulnerability as it's abundant in the IT infrastructure, and it's not easy for organizations to find their assets that contain a vulnerable version of Log4j. We've seen a lot of targeting build systems, source code, so it's a lot easier to inject malicious code right into the development phase, so it's shipped towards organization right out of the box. And supply chain cryptojacking, so this is malicious covert crypto mining through injecting code into the applications. Internet threats, we've seen a lot of physical takedown and destruction of internet infrastructure, especially in the Ukraine area. Active censoring, a lot of websites have been taken down in the Russia and Ukraine area again. State-owned certificate authority, this happens a lot in Russia after the sanctions that have been applied to them. A lot of BGP hijacking and BGP root withdrawal. And of course, the adoption of RPKI that can protect against BGP hijacking still remains pretty low. So closing the presentation on a bit of summary, the threat actors use whatever means necessary in order to adapt and evolve into the changing technologies. Cyber attacks have increased a lot year to year, but we still lack the visibility in order to identify and analyze them. Good practices and coordinated action are important in order to reach a common high level of cybersecurity. And for information sharing is important. It helps potential victims, it helps researchers, and it helps cybersecurity organizations and Enisa in analyzing and providing good practices. Thank you for that, and thank you for your time.